and with the right pieces, with the right couple of news stories, with the right couple of commercials, with the right couple of themes on Law and Order and other dramas and sitcoms that are pushing another way, you can change public opinion into a whole other direction. And we see it happen all the time. We've seen topics where when you surveyed the American public 15 years ago, 76% of the public were against a particular thing, and you survey them now, 60% are for it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so and where you see where the media has absolutely aided and abetted in espousing certain ideas, you know, and manipulating the collective consciousness, you know. So and now again, we're all spiritual people, I believe. You know, we all know the creator exists. If you don't, well, you'll meet him one day anyway, so you know you'll believe it then. But I'll say this just on a spiritual level, you know, again, you can't if you understand, okay, because I don't want to go too deep.
Go ahead.
I'm about to really go there.
Testify.
But it's like this. At the end of the day, you know, you reap what you sow. I'll just say that. You know what I mean? So, you know, and you can see the reaping of a lot of what a lot of people have sown as it reverberates throughout society. So you see these ideas in the media first, then you see it start being repeated in society. Like, for example, the first mass shooting that we heard about that I remember was at UVA. It was the Asian kid. Remember, he shot up all these people with the double guns and stuff, right? And look how many have followed that pattern because it was reported in the media and because they saw that. The reason the media doesn't report on suicides is for the exact same reason. They understand that if we report on suicides, other people who are toiling with this thought or might be wrestling with this thought might be encouraged just by just by the objective coverage of suicide. It can just be as objective as possible. Just by exposing somebody to that idea, the media understands that there's a potential that they could exacerbate that mindset just by exposing people to it. So look at all the mindsets that people are exposed to, all the ideas that people are exposed to in the media, and then that are repeated in the public, you know? And so even when we look at social media and we see these memes of somebody just in some random grocery store and they, you know, acting a fool in some kind of way, and then next thing you know,
it's a challenge.
Exactly. So, you know, that's the power. And again, that's one thing that always that never ceases to amaze me every single day and every single week, month, and year when I see something new come out or I see an idea sort of being promoted in mass that was more of a niche idea or fringe idea just, you know, a year ago or 2 years ago.
Well, you know, it's so crazy. So it's so funny, Darnley, this conversation, and I know you, so I know, you know, in our first meeting, we stood outside Boots and we talked for like 2 hours.
Right.
It's like me and Allison were talking, and like you said, Darnley, as people who've been in media a super long time, we remember. Now, I'm not saying that the old gatekeepers were necessarily any better, but they at least there was a vetting. There was a vetting of information. If you told a story, you mentioned story arcs. Back then, I remember, and Allison always cracks on it because my instructor, Mr. Keller, who's still alive on Facebook, when I did television news, when he would say, you know, when you used to do a news story and you say, you know, the people or people, the sources say who.
Right. Who?
Say, who.
Exactly.
He said who says. His voice is in my head when I watch the news all the time because I was in broadcast journalism, and you know, or like you said, when you did news, I remember when I, you know, doing television news, you remember back in the day, some of the news anchors, you know, they had movements that they'd make, and I started to do the same thing, and he'd be like, "What are you doing?" Like it was like he was examining everything that you were putting forth, like you said, Darnley, in front of the camera, and then in your news writing, what are you saying? And so now it's just crazy. It's crazy town, right? Would you watch these stories? But as you said, Darnley, me and Allison had that conversation about, you remember the day when blah, 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 because you see these half-assed stories now where it's just, since all it is just sensationalism.
Right.
And even, like you said, Darnley, even when you think about from war to accidents and things that happen, you know, people never ask themselves, like I said, when you see an image, so there's been somebody got hit by a car, is there a reason why I need to see the person get hit by a car? Is there a reason why I even need to see the image? Actually, you can report it. You know, Marc Clarke was hit by a car today.
Right.
That's all you really need. I don't need to see a visual
Right.
of where he got hit or a blood spot where he was and all these kind of things. And then, like you said, Darnley, so people like us, you start asking your questions. Why? Like you said, even like with the way we cover weather now it's not enough to say it's going to be 82 degrees today because somebody said that weather and traffic get viewers. Now they'll say it's going to be 82 today. It's going to feel like 99 degrees.
Right.
Okay. What?
Wow.
So first of all, if 82 degrees feels like 82 degrees, it doesn't feel like 99 degrees, but that's just another way for them to extend weather coverage or whatever coverage.
Sure.
And like you said,
Yeah,
in other words, everything, there's a reason why everything happens, but we never examine why. And
exactly.
like you know.
I mean, and I'll give you an even more, I'll give you another example that's even more subtle, because it's a combination of both what we see in the news, as well as what we see in sort of narrative, as well as what we see in reality, as well as social media. When you talk about, because I know Mark and I are married, I don't know if Bootsy's married, but when you look at people say, well, they'll put out statistics around, you know, the divorce rate, for example, like take this idea. A lot of people are unmarried will say, well, half of all marriages end in divorce anyway, so, right? And they'll use that statistic to kind of justify whatever their view is on it, right? But like you said, look at what's not said in that statistic. In other words, we see it in the news, we see it played out in narratives on TV, on reality TV, we see it played out in narratives like themes behind scripted shows, right? But what's actually in this 50% marriage divorce statistic? Well, one, annulments are included in that, okay? So if you say, let's first of all, actually the divorce rate is actually around 44% today, as of 2019. It's actually 44%, which means you have to actually off the break have a 56% chance of a successful marriage, right? So that's one. Two, if it's 44% is the divorce rate, and that includes annulments, well, at least half of those are annulments. And I think we can anecdotally know that probably more than half of the people, and annulments are people who said, you know what, we ain't had no business doing this in the first place. Let's cancel this thing, right? So once you take out so let's see now, I think probably more than half of the people who get married say, you know, we shouldn't have got married in the first place. I think we know anecdotally that more than half of the people who get married probably should have never been married in the first place, right? So, and I'm talking about those Vegas weddings, those quick little, you know what I mean? Those little, you know, kids run off and elope, and then it's, you know, all that's included in that statistic. Okay.
Right.
So let's say if at least half of these are annulments, right? And now you have the other half are marriages that people actually thought might have had a chance. Well, if that knocked that 44% down to 22% is my point, which means you got a 78% chance of success now. Exactly. You follow me? But so my point is, but in the zeitgeist, what is this idea that, oh, well, no point in trying marriage because half ended up divorce. Well, half of that half who ended up divorce said we shouldn't have got married in the first place. So extrapolate them and say, hey, I'm not in that group. I know I should have been married in the first place. So other people who we know should have gotten married in the first place, how many of them are successful? Well, shoot, damn near 80%. That's the real statistic.
Wow.
Exactly.
You follow me? But it's not spun in the media that way. It's not spun in the environment that way. And like I say, when I say the media, I mean as an undifferentiated mass. I'm talking about in books and TV shows and you know, wherever, social media. This idea is just out there and it's spread throughout all different forms of media in this unexamined, unanalyzed way. People take that little narrow statistic and run with it and then say, oh yeah, well, you know, it's only 50%, you know, it's 50-50, I'm gonna get divorced, so I don't believe in marriage anyway. You know what I mean? So that's the type of power that I'm talking about that exists within this media, is that it's kind of like people don't really get the news. They get an impression of what's in the news. Yeah. They don't understand what's important in society. They have an impression of what's important in society. And they automatically assume that the stories and the ideas getting the most attention are the most relevant and the most important, and they often are not. You know, other countries, other environments will use the media to censor people's scope view of the world. You know, they'll limit the media that they have access to. America does the opposite. We over inundate people. You have to sift through the garbage. You have to sift through this huge landfill to find the few jewels of truth. You know, so what they do is they dump a whole bunch of garbage out there and then leave you to sift through it and say, okay, well, you figure out what's actually valuable. But most of us aren't even, like you said, Mark, like you alluded to, aren't even educated enough or aren't even conscientious enough to evaluate what we're consuming and we're consuming junk. And anything you consume that you don't analyze, I mean, I don't care if it's food, I don't care if it's information, it is the same effect. If you're consuming junk on any level, then you become what you eat. You are what you eat. You are what you consume, you know, and it's the same way that works in the physical sense. And I know you with your red sea moss and everything else, you understand that you are what you eat literally. And from a psychological and you know, philosophical standpoint, the information you consume and the ideas that you allow yourself to repeat and that you allow yourself to believe, that's part of your consumption as well. And you have to really examine not just what you're seeing, but what you're not seeing, not just what's there, but what's not there. When I created this show, The Breakdown for BET, the one that's up for a telly right now, that is exactly the pitch that I use with BET. I said, this is what's not on your air. This is what your viewers haven't been seeing all this time. And here's how we can fill a void that we feel is present in your current programming offering, you know, and gave them some specifics on it. And they went for it. And it's been a huge critical success on that part, because if you go to the YouTube channel for BET and you look up The Breakdown, because they first released it on BET Digital, you'll see comment after comment. This is what's been missing. I'm glad BET picked this up, you know, and the public, the intended viewer, is reflecting exactly what I said when I pitched the show in the first place, because I saw not just what was on their air, but what was not on their air, and where I could bridge that gap and present it in a way that matched and mimicked and rhymed with what looked like was on the air, but was bringing content that I knew was missing. You know, and so that's why it's very important for anybody watching this to do like Mark said. You have to not just examine what you're seeing, but examine what you're not seeing, and understand that there's no frame. There's not a single frame, and a frame is a piece of an image. For those who don't know, a fraction of a second. There's not a single frame that is on any professional broadcast medium that's there by accident. Period.
That's the part. That's the part right there. So I want to also remind everybody. I'm just going to scroll up the whole show. You can vote for Darnley's series. You go to peoples.telleawards.com.
I'm taking notes. I just want you to know, dog. I'm taking notes.
Find The Breakdown, episode 1, and rate it 5 stars. We'll revisit it, of course, throughout the show. So, Darnley, the funny part is, it's, you know, and Bootsy, you deal with young people. I have young people. And like you said, the setup, hey, you got to give whoever's doing it, you know, the white supremacy team, let me tell you something, it's masterful, because they set up things in a way where, and again, for those of us who are a certain age in media, we're armed with a little bit more tools than people who aren't, because we know how to vet a story. We know how to vet information. We don't just fall for whatever you hear. We'd be like, the first question we go, because my kids, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, where'd you get that from? Right. Now, they interpret that as, I don't believe them. I think I'm superior. I think they're not smart. You know what I'm saying? And that's exactly what I'm noticing. It's the same dynamic that happens with friends. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, like let's say, and again, let's say sexuality, right? I just saw if you know, let's not do sexuality. This is keep it
Hey, I was sitting there wondering. Oh, I don't know where this is going to go.
It could be too. It could be. You know, I don't want to offend anybody, but what the setup is, if you ask a question about what you, like you said, Darnley, something that you've heard or something that's said, if you ask a question, a critical question, nowadays everybody gets defensive, so they can't even hear your question. They are fighting you. You're going to battle. This happens with my kids all the time. I'm asking the question, where did you get that from? Who are the sources? Who say that? Like Darnley says, we're married, and long-term married people, you know, you get to a certain and you're around other long-term married people, there's a certain way that you move that and gives you information that if you ain't never been married long-term, or if you have not been inside of it, you really don't have the information that it takes. And so when they do these news stories and they talk about blah and talk about blah, it's like that really has nothing to do with it. At the end of the day, what long-term married people understand is it's a commitment. It's a decision that we're going to rock till the wheels fall off, right? Exactly. That's what people from the outside sometimes don't understand. So they'll project, oh, did you see Marc Clarke at the club? He was drinking. Oh, Allison might that. No, because at the end of the day, there's pretty much we said we're gonna rock till the wheels fall off. So that's something like you said that never really gets talked about, even in churches. Even in churches, church has the most
judgmental.
Sometimes church members and church leaders they get stuck on stuff like the man of the house, the leader of the house, sharing the finances 50-50. Man, you're talking about a theory versus what reality. Everybody works it out how they work it out.
Exactly.
Not every married couple has a joint account. You know, some do, some don't. But that has nothing to do with nothing. But it's like same thing with these TV shows and like you said, these conversations and the people that they put in charge. You know, so Steve Harvey becomes the
relationship guru, relationship guru.
So and so becomes the so and so. You know, so and so becomes a news anchor. It's like, dude.
I've said the same thing about Skip Gates. He's a literary critic, but he's been put out by PBS as a historian and a historical expert. And it's like, you know, anyway.
And again, nothing against them.
Yeah, right.
Check because the system. There's a reason why. You know, there's a reason why they don't put. You know, they don't make a person, like I said, a person who's married for 25 years, the marriage expert. Or there's a reason why, like you say, they don't make a seasoned historical expert the history expert. There's a reason. Now, why those reasons? That's a whole other conversation.
Right.
But what I love what Darnley said, Bootsy, for that advice for young people was something that you just never hear. Arm the kids. Have them get their thinking right first. Like, and you know, nowadays everybody has a camera, everybody has a microphone, everybody has a video camera. But what are you saying? What are you? I went to school to learn how to say it, but what are you saying? You know, are you a deep thinker? Do you know how to get to the bottom of the facts as a reporter? You know, are you just going to get on there? And it's so funny because, again, we have great shows every day, but we don't have hundreds of thousands or hundreds of people watching our shows. But when I go to social media, when I go to YouTube, I see a person who's screaming or criticizing or acting wild or showing a gun. Well, we had that on the show the other day. You know, they get all those views because I realize people are in a space where a lot of times people they don't want the truth. They don't want information. They just want to veg out on some BS. And I think at the end of the day, for whatever reason, I can't deliver you just vegging out on the BS. So I may not be the cup of tea for that group. And that's why you just have, 25, 30 people.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bootsy.
And that is an amazing assessment, Mark, really is. So I would love to ask you this as an independent contractor, African-American independent contractor. What are the pluses and the minuses? What are the benefits of social media today as we see it as a person from your perspective? Is social media, does it help? Does it hurt? What is your assessment of it as an independent contractor?
I think that social media, like any media, is, as the name implies, a medium, and it's really up to what you do with it, And so I don't think I don't have any opinion in terms of an inherent moral positioning of the medium itself. I think it can be very valuable and it can be very destructive at the same time. But you can say that literally about almost anything,
Right.
So I think that there's a tremendous potential. For the pendulum to swing either way, and that's another reason why I'm so big on making sure that you're handling this medium with care, and using it responsibly. I think you made me think of something, Mark. I keep this in my edit bay. I'm in the edit bay now. Gordon Parks' documentary, and one of the things that he talked about was the camera being a weapon, a choice of weapons, and he understood exactly what we're talking about now, and so that's something that I keep is literally right here that I just keep just to remind me of the responsibility and of the the tremendous amount of power and potential that what we do has.
What was the most impactful documentary or piece of media literature that had the most impact on you?
Wow. It really depends. I mean, there definitely would not be any one answer to that, because
Yeah.
there are some that are very impactful from a technical standpoint in terms of shot well, edited
I would love to
well.
know.
Some where
I
the
would love to
story's
know.
told well. There's
Mhm.
some where it might just be a very unique amount of access that this person had to a very unique sort of niche piece of
Can you give us
information.
a few of them, please? Can
Man,
you give us a few?
gosh, okay, so for example, I'm trying to think. Like I like, for example, like the Ken Burns jazz series. I thought that was an excellent jazz,
Oh my God!
documentary collection. And I thought in order to do it justice, he needed to do at least 10 2-hour movies, because if you're going to cover the, if you are going to cover the history of jazz, you need at least that. And even with that, he was still, he was able to get a little under the surface, but still had to kind of stay at the surface on a lot of levels. But I thought it was as well fleshed out as you possibly could.
Me too.
In a reasonable fashion, approach a topic like that. And I thought it was done very well and very fairly.
You know, the one that the most Ken Burns thing that most had the most impact on me was the one he did on Jack Johnson, because I had nothing.
Sure, Unforgivable Black. Yeah.
Oh my God! Like I had, what I appreciate about Ken Burns is he gives you a great perspective on all sides of it. You know what I mean? Of things that we might know about, but he goes so in depth. I think the one he just did on Muhammad Ali was life changing. Like the other thing about Ken Burns is he gives you perspectives and stories and video that you have never seen, even through social media. You know,
exactly.
I really think Ken Burns is on a different type of level. But please continue, because I just want to.
And I think Ken Burns is an example of what we talked about earlier. Ken Burns, he doesn't live in New York. He doesn't live in some major city. He lives up in the country somewhere, I think in Vermont or something like that.
Right.
And so he is dedicated to his craft. He's dedicated to telling these stories, to reading, to researching, and again, contributing something of value, as opposed to just trying to do the quick little sensational kind of thing because that's what's popular, And so as much as some of the documentaries that's come out recently regarding, like, say, for example, the extrajudicial killings of Black men that I've seen that have come out, some of them have been good, but some of them have been just kind of following the trend and haven't really contributed to the conversation. I like to think that the one that we created, called The American Lows, The American Legacy of White Supremacy, is on Amazon now.
It's called what again?
It's called The American Lows. The American Lows. And that's the one I mentioned earlier that was written up in the Washington Post and all that. But my objective in that was, again, contributing to the conversation that was being had around, again, Trayvon Martin and Oscar Grant and all these stories that were coming out between 2013 and now, but actually contribute something to the conversation that I felt was missing in a lot of the other conversation, And I think that's an important element to any documentary. And that's one thing that I always look for when I do look at documentaries. I don't want to see just kind of what I've seen before, but I want to get something that only this particular director might have had access to. That's why I like, for example, the Lee Morgan documentary. They called him Morgan, or I called him Morgan. I think they called him Morgan, but it's about the jazz trumpet player Lee Morgan.
Man, how tragic was that?
Yeah, and his basically in a fit of passion, his wife or girlfriend, shoots him on stage in the club and immediately regrets it, etc. But just to have the access to those recordings of the voice recordings, basically the entire documentary is centered around these recordings that the filmmaker had of her, because he interviewed her on audio tape, and she's narrating and kind of the mortar that ties these bricks together throughout this film, So that kind of unique access, you're not going to see another documentary with that recording and hear her voice and that kind of thing. So I think. And there are a lot of other similar examples to that where it's done well.
I thought when you mentioned that, I thought of the Yeezus documentary, just because he had it over time, where who knew, and even the different cameras, from a basic, just who knew that was going to happen. It's
sure,
weird, right?
and I still actually haven't seen it yet, because I want to sit down to really be able to give it give the time it's due, and I don't want to kind of watch it piecemeal fashion, you know what I mean? So I'm going to find one of these Saturdays and Sundays and just watch all three of them, back to back.
You know what the greatest documentary, and I would love to know your assessment on this. The most impactful documentary that I have ever seen in my entire life, and I love media of all things, was Hoop Dreams. Hoop Dreams really did something to me. I would love to know what your assessment of Hoop Dreams was, because I don't know if that was the first reality black documentary I ever seen, but it did so much to me. I would love to know what your assessment of the
Man,
Hoop
I
Dreams,
did
man.
see Hoop Dreams years ago, but I can't say that that it impacted me enough that I really remember,
Mhm,
or can recall anything specific about it.
mhm.
For me, I think one of the most impactful series was Eyes on the Prize.
Oh
That's
my God. Oh
Yeah,
my God.
because I think that
Woo!
again, just very well done. And recently, uh, uh, gosh, the brother who did the Exterminate All the Beasts. That documentary series by Raoul Peck, I
I haven't
believe,
seen that.
is the direct. Oh, that is it's called Exterminate All the Beasts, I believe, and it's actually a 3 or 4 part series. Excellent documentary that covers basically the scourge of the spread of colonialism, white supremacy worldwide.
Wow.
And this philosophy that they had. I mean, excellent. Actually, I was glad when I watched it. I was like, man, I'm glad I put my film out first, because if I didn't, a lot of people be saying I bit off this film, because he had a lot. He basically a lot of things that I go into in the American Lows, but the American Lows is only 88 minutes long. And that's because I was keeping that a 90-minute film. I wasn't going to do one of these 2-3 hour kind of things. I was like, no, 90 minutes is the outside gap. He actually took the time and did probably 4 separate installments, but goes way deeper than I was able to on a lot of the same things that we're talking about in the American Lows. So I've actually even told people the American Lows is almost the Cliff Notes version of Exterminate All the Beasts.
I love
Yeah.
American Lows, man. I'm watching now. I love I like how you presented it, and of course, when you're like the quality piece is just unparalleled.
Yeah.
Speaking of Eyes on the Prize, the part about that, back to the mindset, that I love is, in that you see the 12-year-old Freeman Hrabowski, and who's just retiring as president at UMBC, but just 12 years old. He was an activist at 12, and that for that to be captured, and then he would go on to lead this amazing life. I just think that's amazing, right? And
Again,
then speaking of mindset, this mind right, this interesting to me, Darnley, and you probably know the brother. I've interviewed him a couple times when he was before he became the guy he is now. But my man, 55. Come on, 55 years old. He has the documentaries on Haiti, but he also has the books on pimping.
Tariq Nasheed. You're talking about Tariq
Nasheed.
Nasheed, King Flex, yeah.
So Tariq Nasheed, on one hand, has these documentaries, right, which are great, but then the other expression is kind of some of that pimp shit. So it's kind of like, Darnley, is it that obsession with kind of wanting to have it both ways? It's almost like contradictory. Like on one hand, you're giving us, like you said, this kind of thing that we need, and he's kind of moving like that. Like he's the center in LA that I think he got the money for. But at the same time, I told Bootsy he was when he was raising money to get this center, like for African American center, he was in his Maybach with the top down, and it was like this message is kind of just, that's all over the place.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. I don't think there's any contradiction between being Pan-Africanist and being rich. I think a lot of times Pan-African and rich need to be put into the same sentence more often, because a lot of times people are turned off by the Afrocentric view because they feel like, you got to be a monk, you got to be meditating in a hut somewhere. You know what I mean? A lot of people use this derogatory way that they approach the term hotep and these kind of things. So right. I actually support the fact that here you have a conscious brother who's also showing that, listen, I have some wealth as well, because hopefully that will attract more people who would be turned off otherwise and are attracted to the wealth that the guy with the destructive message has, and says, oh, well, I hear what you're saying, Tariq Nasheed, but this brother over here got a Maybach. He can say, look, well, I got a Maybach too, and I'm actually doing something positive. So I appreciate that aspect of it. I also think that a lot of things that he did around the Mackin and Pimp, he did years ago prior to getting into a lot of the more conscious programming that he's doing now. So I think it just reflects a certain amount of maturity that we all do. I was an MC.
But the immaturity part is the tearing down of, from the Roland Martins to whatever. It's almost like you're lynching. It's almost like, I don't think people realize that when you do that, you lose people too. It's almost, you can't, that there's a group of people, a conscious group of people that if you publicly tear somebody else down and call them a nigga,
right.
I can't really get on your train because
yeah.
you know what I mean? It's almost like your friends. You got married friends who are wild as shit. You just can't be a part of it because I can't link myself to that irresponsibility. It's a place, a character issue. That's what I'm saying. It's a character
right.
issue.
Yeah.
If you have a character issue and you're a leader, it's hard to get people behind you because your character, and when I say character, just like the whole list of the brothers.
Right.
You can't be on social media calling somebody a nigga and then at the same time talking about building up the race. It doesn't make sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then again, that's just my opinion.
Right.
And that's just my opinion. But I think that's where I'm coming from. You know what I mean?
Right. And I understand. And I definitely understand and agree with that idea. I think that it's a touchy thing when it comes to our situation because we know that there are certain internal discussions that we need to have amongst ourselves.
Here we go.
You know what I mean? But then we still need to have a unified front when it comes to the common obstacle we all face, regardless of whether you're left or right or whatever, right?
Exactly.
So I do think that a lot of times it is and can be disadvantageous and counterproductive for us to take internal issues to the general public, you know? So I think that there is definitely some validity to that argument. But I also think that part of what being free and part of what being autonomous is having differing opinions and understanding that we're not a monolith and understand that we do have, somebody can't just call up what they think is a black leader and say, okay, you represent us all, or you represent them all. Okay, we got a problem. Let's call up the big names that we know and they represent black people. There has to be some of us who say, no, we may respect them, but they don't represent all of us. And there's another school of thought within our subgroup that you guys need to respect and acknowledge. So it's a touchy thing. I get it. I get it on both sides. I think that in some ways it can be disadvantageous to publicly criticize other black people as black people. At the same time, it can be disadvantageous to not do it if someone is claiming to represent us all and they indeed don't.
But the irony of it all is, and we always use the different groups to paint the picture. But the irony is that because we don't have a real unified, because we don't know how to move in sync, we will never get to the goal that we talk about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like, and that's the beauty of what they did, which was powerful, was, with enslavement, you broke down the ties that bind, right? And so the other groups that have schools that they go to every day to unite them, that don't disagree in public, they can say, okay, we are going to do this. We cannot. And that's the part. And I think even when we have success, it still is not, it only goes so far because we still can't say, Darnley, here's all our money. We're gonna put it on you. Yeah. Right. And until we do that, it ain't going.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the dilemma. It's the same dilemma that Harriet Tubman and that so many other of our ancestors had when leaving the plantation. Understand, like a lot of times today we'll retrospectively look back and say, oh, these cats still plant on the plantation. Why don't they get off the plantation? Okay, that's one thing. But think about if you were in Mississippi in 1700s, you in Georgia 1700s, whatever, and one of y'all was brave enough to actually get off the plantation. To leave the plantation in the 1700s and escape to go north means never seeing your family again.
Yeah.
You can't go back. You ain't going back to summer break to see how people are doing back on the plantation. When you left the plantation, you were gone forever. And you knew that you would never see anybody who you left back there again. And they knew they would never see you again. So there are a lot of us who would have left the plantation, but not because we love Massa so much that we stayed. It's because we loved our aunts, we loved our uncles, we loved our children, our nieces and nephews, and we didn't leave because of them. And so what happens is those who, so paralleling today, you have some of us who may not necessarily have these particular ties or tethers to a particular situation. So they can say, okay, fine, I'm just going to leave and I'm going to do my own thing. How come everybody can't do that? But that person doing it may not have family at all. They might not have, you know what I'm saying? They may not be as tied in and roped into that place. So they are free enough to be able to just go do something on their own. Those of us who are entrepreneurs understand that. Some people some people need a job, and for good reason. And there are others of us who are more entrepreneurial who can take certain risks and are willing to take those risks. And we do, and then we have some success. And then people say, well, how'd you do it? And we say, well, we left the plantation and we didn't see our family ever again. That's how we did it. And they say, hold on, I'm not really ready to necessarily do that, So the point is, now we have a situation where you have some people who are you mentioned success, are able to actually have some degree of success, but you have so many more of us who still ain't even free yet.
Right.
So you can't be even talk about being successful when you ain't even got free yet.
Right.
You can't be a successful slave. That's the real oxymoron. You follow me? And so when you talk about us being unified in terms of kind of getting there, what we have to understand is that some of us getting there means success, whereas other of us getting there just means getting free in the first place. Others of us are in a situation where it's like, hey, we can't leave the plantation, so all I can do is fight for better conditions on the plantation. Because I'm not in a position to do like my cousin did and leave and go north to Canada somewhere. I got to stay here in Mississippi because I got all these other people who rely on me. So we got to stay here and fight with massa and deal with massa to help things get better here on this plantation, because we don't have the ability to leave this land. So I understand both mentalities. And because of those mentalities, I think that there is a diversity amongst Black people in terms of what, quote, success even looks like. For the person who needs to stay on that plantation, success looks like reforming the plantation. For those of us who don't need the plantation, we'll say, okay, I'm off this plantation. That's what success looks like for us, is getting off of it altogether. So those who are off the plantation then want to criticize those who are on. Those who are on want to criticize those who are off. And these are all legitimate. What I'm saying, these are all legitimate perspectives, and so I think it's a mistake for us to kind of dismiss any of our perspectives.
That's true.
And just understand that they all come from a valid place, and they all come from a place of us having a different set of priorities based on our own circumstance.
And you know what? And I think you're right. I think the ultimate answer to it, and I'm glad we had this discussion, I think the ultimate answer to it, and I think that's something that we can offer here, is it's okay for us to disagree.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay for us to disagree. We are down. And I think the reason to clear up, I guess, my questioning and even my criticism of Tariq Nasheed and some others, my criticism is a criticism, but with the understanding that I accept it all so we can move into a certain degree, direction. You know what I mean?
Understand we're ultimately on the same page, regardless.
I guess that's what it is. I see these guys with all this power engaged in a fight, when if we could say, Darnley, you and I disagree, but we move in this way. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
As opposed to me tearing Darnley down and everything that he does. I guess that's the part that I think that hurts.
And I get it. Yeah, I think oftentimes, though, like we said earlier, in terms of more of us need to be educated on how to consume media. I think a lot of brothers like that, or a lot of brothers in general, just not just Tariq in particular, but I'll say that a lot of times that's their attempt to wake their audience up, to get them looking at the mainstream messages differently. You know what I mean? And like, in other words, is they see all these sort of reverential references to certain figures, right? And then so for somebody to come out, it reminds me of when Public Enemy said Elvis was a hero the most, but he never meant shit to me. You see, straight up racist. The sucker was simple and plain. Mother F him and John Wayne, right? Now, for somebody who grew up in a world where Elvis was revered, John Wayne was revered, and you got these guys saying, man, F Elvis, F John Wayne. For me, it as a kid hearing that, it absolutely changed my perspective. Like, you know what? Yeah, man, forget Elvis, forget John Wayne, right?
Right.
So I think a lot of times when certain members of our demographic are held up as representing us all and being the mouthpieces for us all, it does take some of us saying, man, forget that, man. We got to, you need somebody to kind of, you do need to disrupt the sort of hypnosis that people can go under and assume that, certain figures are just to be unquestionably revered at all costs. But I hear what you're saying as well, is the way you do it and the way that you approach it can be more destructive than constructive if it's not done right. But I'll say this, though. I remember, I think what it's about too, though, is creating a vision, is imparting on our people what is the vision for the future. And in other words, I think a lot of times we will access certain ideas if we just know it's even available. I'll give you an example. I remember, you probably remember, both of y'all probably remember years ago. I want to say it's around 2011. It was right after Obama had gotten elected. 2010. It was during his first administration, and I think Tavis Smiley had the State of the Black Union. And he had like Julian Malveaux and Cornel West and Dyson and Farrakhan and everybody sitting around the rectangular table, remember? And they were discussing, and a theme that came up, if you remember, a theme that came up because it stood out to me was basically, hey, there's almost 40 million black people in there. There's 40 million, some million black people in America. If we kind of, get on the same page to agree, there's nothing we can't make this government do for us, basically, because this whole meeting was about what do we want from this black president, et cetera, right. But I looked at that and I said, wow, that's a true statement. But why is that? Why stop there? Why is that the vision? In other words, I looked at it and I said, well, look, if 40-something million of us is on the same page, we don't need the government to do nothing for us. Exactly. Well, why don't we elevate that to the idea? Why don't we make that the ideal, and let's build on ideas whereby we can leverage our own power, our own resources for our own benefit without having to petition the government, without having to get third-party allies and all this stuff. If 40-something million of us with $1 trillion of spending power can't use those resources to do for ourselves, what are we even talking about here? But I think that perspective wasn't the central focus of that conference because quite frankly, a lot of people having it have always assumed that our success would come through kind of petitioning the government in some kind of way. You know what I mean? And it would come through sort of putting pressure on the people with power as opposed and participating. And that's why you talk about participation and representation within the system as opposed to creating our own system. Dealing with our own system. You were talking about the folks who have their own schools, their own day schools, their own weekend schools that they use to, to teach their next generations. They're not going to the public school system saying, hey, how come you're not teaching our language? How come you're not teaching our history? How come you're not teaching our religion? They said, no, the public school isn't teaching our language, history, and religion. So we're going to make sure our kids go to a school where they do learn their language, their history, and their religion. Yeah. You follow me? And that's the same type of perspective I think that would benefit us as a people if instead of using our brain power and to figure out how we can get somebody to help us, use our brain power to figure out how we can help ourselves, And so I absolutely welcome the idea that you have brothers out here who are debating and wrestling with sort of the established kind of approach to Black progress. But I do also agree that it can be done in a way that isn't that doesn't divide us and doesn't and keeps us unified on the overall big picture. You know what I mean? It's like, I would love to see a brother say, listen, hey, I disagree with, say, Al Sharpton's approach or Jesse Jackson's approach or whatever, but I respect the brothers. They've been at it a long time. I would not besmirch anything they do. We need soldiers on that front, but let me organize some people who are going to fight on this front. I'm of the mindset of Malcolm. Malcolm said, when you're being attacked from all sides, you need soldiers on all fronts. So I'm not going to sit up here and say, I'm sorry, my eyes keep watering. Say all black people need to join the Democratic Party or Republican Party or be independent. We need to be everywhere. I'm not going to say that more of us need to be business owners and more of us need to be CEOs. No, you need some CEOs and you need some business owners. We need to be represented in every arena, not for representation's sake, but for leverage sake, so that we can leverage the access that we have in these different arenas for our own benefit as a people, as opposed to thinking about how we can align with somebody else's talking points. Because I think so often a lot of Black folks are more so parroting white liberal talking points regarding Black progress, as opposed to actually analyzing our condition and doing what's genuinely best for us. One of the things that Amos Wilson said is that if you want your Black child, for example, to have the same education as a white child, you're guaranteeing your Black child to be subservient to that white child then, because white people aren't learning how to solve Black people's problems. Right. We need a special education that will help liberate us from our condition. Education is only good as much as it helps you get free. Not just to get a job, not just to put yourself on the auction block. It's not pig fat that you spread your degree all over yourself and say, okay, I'm up for the highest bidder now. That's the same thing we're doing on the plantation, And
I think the interesting thing, and I think maybe that's where we're at an age, we're at an experience level, we're at an age where though there's a couple things that happen, as you know, Darnley, as a business owner who's not just a business owner who has now you built out a system, in place that, it's a machine, right? It's an infrastructure. So it's almost like Black folks, it's like Black people talking about, or not Black people, anybody talking about, like what you just said. That leap he's talking about, though, the problem is if you're talking to people who haven't even mastered the how to get education, right? If you're talking to somebody who does not have an education, and what he just said, it's almost like this person has no idea what he's talking about. There's no way you can get from A to B. You can't get from A to Z. You first have to get to A to B.
Right.
I think a lot of the problem is with these shows and even these conversations, from like what you just said, is that you're talking to a group of people who haven't got from A to B though. And so if you don't know A to B, just like that session about what we want from our black president, if you're not participating in your neighborhood, if you're not participating in PTA, if you're not participating in your life, you might not be ready to tell the president what you need. You don't even know what you need.
Right.
And I think that's what we keep getting in. And so then people they'll drop like you said, they'll drop a philosophy hold on to something else, but you never really held on to any real philosophy anyway. So I think this is people like us. It's important that we have these conversations, but I think it's also important that we then show people. That's what's so beautiful about what Bootsy's doing. Boots on the ground. I'm taking children, young people who maybe have not had the best access to opportunity. I'm not only giving them access to opportunity, I'm showing them a trade, I'm showing them a skill set that now puts them in an education system. Like you said, some people will say, well, but that education system's really just teaching you how to be subservient, right? But it has to start with some type of education, right?
Right.
Now, if you bring in a Darnley in, Bootsy bringing in a Marc Clarke, a Darnley, or whoever.
Yeah, because I'm bringing both of y'all. So just come on, just get ready. Into the class and having these kind of conversations. Now you can give them some perspectives, because that's the part that I think is missing out. When you get to a position where you can look down and see, then you can kind of say, like you said, Darnley, well, like how this whole thing started, our kind of conversation on the different influencers. You say, well, Mark, I feel this way about this influencer. Right.
We didn't have to tear anybody down. You didn't have to say this is right, this is wrong. You give me your informed information on that person, right? So then you can say, okay, I see your point. And then and that's something else I noticed, Darnley, that doesn't happen is these kind of real conversations, but they don't result in people getting really personal and then tearing each other down,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it becomes too much of a distraction. And I think too, and it also is again, we're still recovering from slavery. You know what I'm saying? It's like Dr. George DeGroy talks about how, there was never a mental health plan or mental recovery plan or therapy for enslaved Africans who were then supposedly free. You know what I mean? So we are still suffering the ripple effects of that. And that mindset is one of them, one where we can't disagree without being disagreeable, and I think that again, just even putting this idea out there that we can do that. And that's one thing I do appreciate about a lot of the work that Will Packer's doing in the reality show world in terms of the love shows that he's putting together, Black love shows. He's not showing Black people bickering. He's showing Black people solving problems, sitting down saying, hey, I have a problem with what you did, blah, 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 talking it out, resolving the issue amicably, and deciding to be together or not, or whatever they're going to do, say it's a dating show. And I think just that example is what we can do more of. This is what I was saying with somebody who has an education. He got the same education as somebody else in his field, but he was able to apply it and through his worldview and through a lens that he knew would be beneficial for his people. Because if you would allow somebody else, if you allow yourself as a Black person to parrot somebody else's narrative about us, that's when you start running into trouble. You know what I mean? Go ahead, brother.
But I think the main thing is great is that what both of you guys said in the beginning. Darnley, you said how you ventured to it as a kid at Mount Vernon, trying to figure out, not knowing what you did. Mark, you said you learned about it in middle school. And I just think the more discussions we have and the more we intertwine and engage with these young minds is really what's going to be the key to developing the next wave. But also, I just think, and I've always looked at it like this, and I would love to know you guys' perspective. I almost look at journalism and what you two guys are doing as almost like art. Like, I really believe media is art, and you can paint the picture and describe it the way you is. The way, Darnley, you may see a certain topic or situation would be different, but as long as we can have the discussion and agree to disagree or get a perspective out of it, I think it's great. And I think that's the one thing that I'm appreciating about this discussion as well. But the other thing is, and I don't know where I heard this at, and I would love to know, do you guys see it this way? I heard where somebody pretty much said that I'm sorry, Bruce Johnson said this. May he rest in peace. He said that he feel like journalism and media is a business of service. Do you guys agree with that premise, or would you change that perspective? What is your perspective on? Do you really believe at the end of the day what you're doing is service?
I think it is. I mean, and again, it just matter of, are you coming down, and it comes down to who are you serving, you know?
Right.
It's a service industry, whether you mean it to or not, whether you mean it to be or not, or whether you think it is or not. You're serving someone's interest anytime you point that camera. Matter of fact, a lot of times we talk about being unbiased in media, for example. And one of the things that I talk about in my lectures is that as soon as I turn on my camera, I'm biased. I haven't even pointed in the direction. As soon as I turn my camera on, I'm automatically biased, because only but so much can fit into. I have a 360-degree set or situation that I'm in, so I only have this big of a screen on this big of a lens on my camera. I can't get all 360 degrees of what's going on. I can't get the last 2 weeks that led up to what's happening, or the next 2 weeks that after. All I have is a narrow image of whatever's happening in this big space. So as soon as I turn my camera on and point it at you instead of pointing it at Mark, I'm showing bias.
Wow.
You follow me? So again, you have to understand so you're always in service, and so you have to recognize your own biases, recognize your own sort of default settings, and then do your best to try to compensate for those, or own those. Say, this is the bias that I'm approaching this with, and it's up to somebody else to come up with a opposing view, and you create balance through that. You know what I mean? Through having different people who are clearly biased in their various directions, and you kind of work out the truth, or you work out a perspective through the balance of those, you know? But I would absolutely agree that it is a service industry, and it's a matter of just, you have to be very conscientious about who it is and what it is you are indeed serving.
Well, and to credit Bruce, and again, God rest his soul, I think many, especially of that generation, but many people of color who work inside a newsroom, put it on them, they make it a responsibility to get that story told that probably isn't going to get told. They make that responsibility to serve the community from a standpoint of, like when I was on Great Day Washington, right? They allowed me to, pick things I wanted to cover. So I covered Dr. Rabowski, I covered, Harold Bell. I covered, and because it was an opportunity to be able to flesh out a story from a perspective that is just rarely seen on television. So I think Bruce and especially the journalists from that generation, they were all about that. I saw the story about the young lady, the baby who was burned in a fire, and he had a relationship with her whole life. Mm-hmm. That's not a reporter coming out to cover a story. That's somebody who took it on himself to not only cover this story, but to make a difference. So I think for him, it was service. If I'm honest, I think, my success on the Big Fat Morning Show and my success in media, and my wife, Allison, is that, we didn't want to get in front of the mic just so we could get in front of the mic or get in front of the camera to look good. We were saying that we want to make a positive change in our community. And wherever that city I worked in was that community, right? And so I think, like back to what Darnley started this whole thing with. If we have those type of journalists, then you can change the world. But sadly, I think there's a generation that just wants to be stars. I mean, Darnley, we all talk to kids all the time. A lot of kids just want to be stars. And sadly, it's to the point where you see a lot of it. You can see it in the reporting. Darnley, I was telling Bootsy the other day, we remember when I say nuclear power to our generation, a flag pops up, right? Nuclear power. The first thing we go to is meltdown and nuclear waste. Right. I saw a package the other day, Darnley, and they spent about this much on the negative part of nuclear power, right? So again, if you're watching this, if you're young, you don't know anything about it, you would believe, well, why aren't we doing this tomorrow? Right. Well, because we know there's a deadly secret they're not talking about. And we see this happen a lot nowadays. Now you got the one channel is going to lean extremely this way, another channel is going to lean extremely that way, and you're just seeing this BS. And so, like Darnley said, it's serving all right. It's serving a message. It's serving it's serving misinformation. And so hopefully we can, go ahead, Darnley.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and remember too, it's also that's why history is important, because most modern media is basically the first newspaper published in America was like the Boston Chronicle, the Boston Journal, or something back in like 1721 or something. But the point is, most of the initial mass media in America was newspapers, and then radio came along, and then television, and then internet. So the point is, though, most newspapers, pretty much all newspapers, were started by some rich guy who wanted to just control the public opinion. You know what I'm saying? When you look at the history of pretty much every newspaper, it was basically started by like some rich dude who wanted to have a paper. Today, I guess people know, say, for example, Rupert Murdoch in particular, but he is very typical of the average media owner historically in this country. It's always been about some individual who wanted to own a newspaper or own a TV station, or in these cases, own websites and these kind of things to be of service to their agenda, their constituency, what the value system that they found important. So it's important that we approach this industry the same way, and instead of saying I want to just be a part of this other machine and pushing their agenda, we need to approach it with our own agenda, with our own perspective, with our own mission in mind, and our own sense of contribution. Otherwise, we'll just get caught up in, for example, talking about our people the way other people talk about our people. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Or building certain assumptions into stories that other people build into assumptions of stories that when they write about us. So I just wanted to just mention that part. The media has always been very directly and unashamedly biased, and unashamedly about usually a particular individual person's agenda and opinion and perspective of the world that they wanted to promote via this newspaper. And again, we look at it how it's happening in our favor. That's why the Honorable Elijah Muhammad started Final Call. You know what I'm saying? Nation Islam started the Final Call newspaper, so that their group could put their point of view out to the people, giving these papers out and saying, "Hey, read this." So
and Frederick Douglass with the North Star, Bootsy again.
Exactly.
You got to have us, because this is information that they may or may not know. Shout out to my grandfather, I.E. Foster, the Illinois Chronicle, Springfield, Illinois. And so it's like you said,
it's so interesting. Let me say it's so I'm sorry, Mark. It's so interesting we had this discussion. Last night, I was on a Zoom for, people who live locally. In D.C. local politics, they just put off Kenyon McDuffie off the ballot for old law for the D.C. State Attorney General. Last night, I was on a call with Marion Barry's wife, a whole bunch of people from our community, and we were talking about the narrative and how we want to collaboratively come up with an effort to talk about voters' rights for DC locals. And it's so interesting. I'm having this conversation because, I'm sure you guys will know, you'll be surprised how voter suppression, but also how the media is like spinning it or whatever. So all this information is like really blowing my mind, because I was literally on a call with Marion Barry's ex-wife, and she literally talked about 2 hours about how the role the media played, the fact that the government spent $25 million in 1986 to investigate Marion Barry, which today would be $125 million, and the role that the media played in it. So I'm just, hearing these perspectives, hearing this insight has been amazing.
What? It's Darnley's fault. Darnley,
yes, it is. Yes, it is.
We're gonna let you go, Darnley, because we're gonna push again to have everybody not only check it out but also vote for your series. But Darnley, I just wanted to hop on this real quick. Speaking of politics, so and what we were talking about early, Darnley, if we have conversations like this, Darnley, you know what? I would love to talk to you about your studio and doing the show from the studio and things like that. To expand it. But like, for instance, so Wes Moore is running for governor, right? And so now, and you mentioned earlier, Darnley, talking points, right? And we already know the play, right? We know the play. Wes Moore, front runner, financial front runner. He checks all the boxes. He's a real threat. Now they're coming for him for this not being from Baltimore, right?
Okay.
They're saying he's not from Baltimore, blah, blah, blah. Now, the part about it so funny is, as Darnley talked about earlier, who cares? It's really not an issue. It's really not an issue. But man, they are, how they are they got the coffers out and they're driving this thing, and they know, as Darnley mentioned earlier, if you keep saying it, you keep pushing it out there, you keep, question mark. The funny part about it is, if you just stop and think about it, we're sitting around a dinner table and they're like, what's the issue? Well, in the book, he said he's from Baltimore, the other Westmore. And, he ain't really from Baltimore. I mean, he lived here, but he da. Man, who gives a shit? Right?
Exactly.
But they're actually making it. And as Darnley said earlier, they can make it a mountain. They can make this a mountain.
Right.
And if you let them have access to your brain, it'll make it a mountain. Well, what else is he lying about?
Right. Right.
And so for some people, it's like, who cares? But again, the media has the power to bombard your mind with it, where it becomes something. It reminds you of you remember the candidate, and he was running for president, and his reaction. Remember, we're gonna go here and go here and go woo.
Oh yeah.
Howard Dean. Yeah.
That took him out.
Right.
Took him out.
Which, who cares, right? But it just speaks to it's going to be interesting to see, because he also has money to counter it. But it's like, but again, with all that's going on in this world, with all these real issues that are facing Maryland, they're going to make this a real issue.
Wow.
And it just doesn't even matter. But it speaks to, again, the power of the media. So as Darnley started this with, if we can teach kids to wield the camera and wield the microphone and wield their pen, we can make a huge difference. And even when we say huge difference, we're just saying making it a better world.
Right.
So, Darnley.
But also a huge difference.
Huh?
But also a huge difference.
And a huge difference. So, Darnley, okay, I have it, the guy here. Vote. Go to peoples.teleaward.com. Find the breakdown, episode 1. Rate it with 5 stars. Darnley, what else can people do to help support this? Because it's going down today, right? They need to do it now.
Yeah. You have to vote right now. Today, Friday, April 22nd, is the last day of voting. It opened up Monday, and people have been voting all week. And so, this is the People's Telly Award. We're up against some good competition. We have a few other shows from Fox and from Viacom and some other competitors up there. And we're proud to be a part of it, and we're glad that people are watching the show enough that it's being considered for this type of recognition, So, definitely go to peoples.teleawards.com. And of course, anybody out there, we do TV shows, we do high-end video production, but anybody who might be watching, looking to, might be a communications director for a company, or, a PR director for a firm or ad agency, can definitely reach out to us at imaginationmediallc.com, which is my company. And, we're glad to help you produce whatever projects you might have on the horizon, looking for somebody to put together for you, because that's what we do.
And we also want to announce a partnership with Marc Clarke Media and
Imagination Media. Absolutely.
There's no project we can't do. And let me just say this, Bootsy, worldwide.
Indeed.
Also,
for the worldwide.
Also, is there any chance I can get you to speak to my amazing youth, teen, and college broadcast journalism students?
Absolutely, I would love to. I want to talk to you about something else that I was just talking to my wife about the other day. One of the things that we're looking at is starting both a video production training academy out of our studio, as well as a scholarship for students who are going to pursue degrees for Black students looking to pursue degrees in broadcast journalism.
Well, don't worry about it. I have 18 students, but I got 18 applicants right now, literally, that you can have the information in 10 minutes. I would love that, just have a conversation, because we have a project coming that I'm having problems getting off a situation. So I would love to talk to you off air about that as well.
Absolutely. We can definitely do that.
And Bootsy, that other thing we talked about, Darnley would be a perfect place to do that too, for that other need that you discovered was needed.
Oh my God, a massive need.
Right? Yes.
That, I mean, massive. Like, I still get calls on this thing.
Okay.
Yeah, and Darnley would be, we're talking about that. So each day on the mix day, on the mic stay. No, right. Darnley, man, it was a blessing. It was thank you so much. And people are gonna vote. Okay.
And congratulations on everything. Really. If nobody told you that as a young black man, you know, being an entrepreneur and trying to get your feet, this is inspiring, this is motivated, but also congratulations, my brother. This is amazing.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
All right, man. Hug the wife for me. Love the family, man. And I look forward to talking to you soon, my brother. Darnley, again, if you have not voted, the information is right there. I'll let it scroll across the screen as we wrap things up. And
KellyAwards.com.
Have a great weekend, by the way. Have a great weekend, everybody, and be safe. All right? Peace.
Just don't know. I don't know. I'm looking, yeah.
Marc Clarke, that's classic. I love it.